Hello, I'm Helen Henley, Health Optimization Coach, and I'm delighted to be here with Elwin Robinson, founder of Lionheart Herbs, creator of Health Coaching Institute, Complete Detox Academy, High Energy Academy, and author of The Easy Exhaustion Cure. Well, today I am sat in a dark, dismal, damp West Wales. Summer is definitely retreating. So today, if it's all right with you, Elwin, I would like to talk about how to be warm, healthy, and to have radiant health throughout the winter and the approaching cold months. So, yes, if we could address that, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, excellent. A great question. And, of course, this is especially relevant to those of us on the call who perhaps want to do some kind of cleansing over the coming months, or anyone who wants to eat a raw food diet over the coming months. Both of those cases, generally, it's even harder than otherwise to stay warm and to keep a good, strong immunity. So definitely worth listening to, no matter what, and especially worth listening to if you're in either of those two situations, I would say.
Absolutely. Because you notice with the change of the weather that people suddenly start to come down with illnesses, people's mood decreases, and that general feeling of abundance and sort of expansion that we've had for this wonderful summer starts to decrease. So if we want to keep our immune system healthy and to really sort of function at our best through the winter, where is a good place to start, Elwin?
Well, there's a lot we can and will cover, but I guess one thing we can start with is just to address why it comes on this time of year, right? Because from the kind of standard Western perspective, there's this idea that the only factor is that something's going around and I catch it, right, in terms of illnesses. And so I'm not one of those totally alternative people who just doesn't believe in viruses or anything like that. I mean, I understand that they're there and that they are a contributing factor to illness. However, I also need to point out that the fairly obvious point that not everyone gets ill, and so even in the case of the most extreme, horrific virus, like Ebola, for instance, doing the rounds right now on the planet, and one of those cases that we could see as an exception to the alternative health idea that there's no such thing as an infection. This is something that's very virulent, very strong. But still, even with something as incredibly powerful as this, there's still not 100% rate of people being infected by it, right? There's still a small proportion of people who remain immune and can be immune. And so the thing to understand is it's not just the outside world. It's not just something getting you, although that is a factor. The key factor and the more important factor to focus on, because it's the one that you can control, and because worrying and being anxious and stressing is only more likely to lead you to being ill, not less. So the thing that we really should be focusing on is our cells and what we can do to make our cells strong, to make our immunity strong. So if we just look at what changes, what factors are changing, why are all these illnesses getting us? And let's assume it's not that they're suddenly doing the rounds, because let's assume that they've been there all along, just waiting for us, right? Which is probably more accurate. So what suddenly changed? And the thing that's changed, well, first of all, it's a lack of sunlight, right? And this is a fairly obvious factor. And so this affects us in at least two ways that has now been validated scientifically. Way number one is that it's less sun on the skin. Now, a lot of people who live and work indoors, maybe they're not getting sun during the skin any time of the year, so there's an ongoing issue. But, even if you are someone who gets it and goes outside, if you have less sun outside, then there's less chance for that to hit your skin and for that to produce vitamin D. And vitamin D, or specifically vitamin D3, has been found to be one of the most potent and powerful factors for immune system health. Right? This is really proven beyond all doubt, beyond all skepticism, beyond anything. This is a crucial key factor. So that's factor number one. Factor number two about sunlight, and this is something that's less understood, less focused on. So vitamin D3, most people probably have heard of. This thing you might not, is that it's also very, very important to have direct or indirect, but how do I put this? Not filtered, so not filtered through glass specifically, sunlight in the eyes. Obviously, you don't want bright sunlight, right? I'm not saying to go and stare in the zenith of the sun at high noon in hot weather. That's obviously going to burn your eyes and damage them. But just being outside and having sunlight rather than, rather than not ever getting any direct sunlight in the eyes or not getting enough, which is the case for most people, it leads to a situation of serotonin depletion. And so serotonin is a neurotransmitter which relates to the feeling of happiness, feeling of connection, something that women especially are more likely to become deficient in, especially if they don't have other factors which help to stimulate serotonin. So other things that stimulate serotonin obviously are connection with other people, connection with nature, connection with yourself. There's a self-nurturing. And so, both men and women can become deficient in it, but women have a particular tendency to become deficient in serotonin, whereas men have more of a tendency to become deficient in dopamine, which are kind of complementary but opposite neurotransmitters. So when we're not getting direct sunlight in the eyes, if we're also living a kind of lifestyle, which means that we're not having much connection with people, we're not having much nurturing for ourselves or others, then that can lead to a situation of, quite severe serotonin depletion. And the more our serotonin is depleted, the more that we experience stress and anxiety. And I know we've got it planned for this interview to talk more about that later, so we'll address that in a little bit. But, suffice to say for now that stress, right, adrenal overactivity, sympathetic nervous system, chronic overactivity, is one of the key factors for illness, also aging, and also even feeling cold, right? So all of these things are tied together. And so we'll talk about stress in a bit. So those are two things that change, all related to the sunlight. And then the other thing, which is, pretty obvious, is temperature, right? As you said, Helen, it's probably dropped by quite a few degrees over there in the UK, over here in the UK, depending where you're listening from, right? And probably most of us in the Northern Hemisphere are feeling that. So that makes a difference to our immune system. Now, obviously our body works hard to maintain this constant temperature. And so, in an ideal world with a super strong body, it wouldn't matter if you were in like 50 centigrade heat or, minus 10 centigrade heat, your body would maintain exactly the same temperature. So that's an ideal world. But it requires a lot of energy to do that, and it requires a very strong body to do that. And so if you don't have a lot of energy, if you don't have a very strong body, then it's got to be said that it's easier for your body to maintain the correct temperature when the outside world is kind of supportive of that. And so what I'm getting at here is when it gets cold, your body gets a bit colder. There's not a lot, but it can be a bit. And that bit, that, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3 degrees, something like that, actually makes a big difference to the functioning of your immune system. And this is one of the reasons why I recommend saunas so highly. We can again talk about that in a bit if we want to expand on that. But, like when I'm in a cold climate, I will like to go for a sauna or a hot bath most days, if not every day, to keep bringing my core temperature back up and to keep boosting my immune system, right? Now, not like I can't survive without that, obviously, but this is a good idea. And this is why in Scandinavian countries, which are a lot more northerly than probably the UK, where most people are listening to this from, or northern US, kind of both. That's why they have this tradition of doing exactly that, right? Now, you've got to be careful with that. You need to be adequately hydrated. You need to have enough electrolytes. I'm not saying it's a cure-all if you don't know what you're doing, but this is the point that I'm making is we can expect that when there's more cold, that we're going to have more chance of getting a cold, more chance of getting ill, because our immune system is very much tied to our core body temperature. And then one more factor, which again is environmental, is so cold is kind of primary, but also this issue of damp and wind, right? And so if you're in a damp environment, if you're in an environment that's more damp, that's more likely to exacerbate what in Chinese medicine they call damp conditions in the body, specifically yeast infections, fungal infections, so things like candida, most famously, right? They're exacerbated, they're made worse when you're in a damp atmosphere, and I define damp as a kind of stagnant humidity, right? And so that's where a lot of the time people experience that maybe skin conditions get worse. They experience that maybe their joints become more sore. This is like a classic thing, like when it's winter time, your joints hurt a lot more. And so this will tend to relate to damp. And you'll notice when the weather is damp, you'll feel worse. When the weather is less damp, you'll feel better. And then lastly, there's wind. And so I'm not talking here about a gentle breeze, but when you've got wind bashing you and bashing you, from a Taoist point of view, this is something that is actually invading your system and creating, again, illness in the body. And this relates especially to the liver organ system. And so if your liver is weak, as mine has been most of my life, it's at least, a big factor of it is genetically. My mother's liver was very weak. My father's wasn't exactly super strong either. And so, for me, like if I'm in strong wind, like hitting me for a while, say if I'm out walking, this will have an adverse effect on me. Whereas someone who has strong immunity and a strong liver, they may not even notice it. It may be completely irrelevant to them. So these are all the kind of factors. So it's not just an absence of sunlight. It's not just an absence of warmth. It's also that all of these factors. And I'm not trying to say, oh, you should be scared of cold. You should be scared of damp. You should be scared of wind. But just to be aware that these are things that affect your body. The stronger your body is, obviously, the less likely it is to affect you. But these are the factors that are going on. This is what's changing as we go from summer to winter.
And absolutely. I mean, it's just intelligent to adapt to your surroundings, isn't it? I mean, that you do that with everything. Whatever situation the more adaptive you are to it, the easier that you can handle it. I guess you could also throw in grounding, because we don't actually have as much contact with the earth in the winter, do we? We're not out there on the beach or barefoot in the garden. So there are so many things.
Great point. And so there's two other factors, grounding and fresh air. So generally, as you say, as we get more into winter, we want to stay indoors. We're more likely to want to keep the windows shut. And so we get less fresh air and we get less connected to the earth. And these things, they relate indirectly to immunity, but they relate very directly and specifically to the issue of stress. So the more that we are disconnected from the earth, the more that we'll tend to have stress, the more we'll tend to have free radicals building up in our body, and the more that we are deprived of oxygen, the more we're going to have a very real stress. Most people don't even notice this, but it's so important. Like literally, if you actually couldn't breathe for 2 minutes, you would panic and, probably fight as if your life was depending on it, and very soon after you would die, So this is how important fresh air is. And yet so many of us are in a situation of suboptimal fresh air. We feel so cold inside ourselves that we don't want to open a window, or we don't want to step outside. So we stay in this hot baking room, but also we're kind of slowly suffocating ourselves. This is a really unpleasant kind of situation that we need to be aware of and that we need to address in some way. So absolutely, those are factors too, definitely. That
was so many things, Elwin. So I'd like to go through them all individually and get some practical tips for each of them. So if we go back to one of the first things you said, which was vitamin D3, I mean, even the government has now acknowledged that people should be taking this vitamin. So this isn't sort of radical woo-woo out there. It's pretty sort of acknowledged now. So what would be the best way to take your vitamin D3? Are always created equally?
Good question. So first of all, I think everyone knows these days that they need D3, not D2. But just mention that first. We want the animal version, even though there are kind of vegan versions of that animal version. We want we want that D3 version. So one thing I'll mention before I get into what type of vitamin D3 I recommend is just that these things don't tend to work very well in isolation. So I also recommend something like a daily multiple, just as a general multivitamin, multi-mineral, combination of it's also got antioxidants, it's got, cofactors, bioflavonoids, it's got enzymes, all these kind of things. Just like a basic, good quality multi. Now, daily multiple one is the one that I use, the one I stand behind, but, if you listening out there, there's one that you swear by, that's cool as well. But, to have a good multi kind of formula. However, a good multi formula is not going to give you necessarily the best D3. It's not going to give you the type of D3 that you probably need. Now, I will say with D3, as well, just before I recommend a type, we need to be careful not to overdo it. Helen and I actually know someone, a friend and a client, who actually had too much D3. So this is something that we actually do want to be careful with. with a lot of things like tonic herbs, of course, we can just have as many as we want and we're fine. You know, I mean, I say that that's not a medical statement, but that is a 5,000 years of history statement. With B vitamins and vitamin C, they're water soluble, so your body flushes them out very quickly. So even if you have massive doses, it's not an issue. Again, except for maybe rare circumstances with certain medical conditions. But vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin, and so you can build up amounts greater than you need. So you do need to be aware of that. Luckily, this is something that you can get tested reasonably cheaply by a nutritionist or even by your doctor. So it's not something that's very, very difficult to test. So having said all that, generally most people are massively deficient in it, especially if you're in a situation where you don't get a lot of sunlight, whether it's because it's not there or because you don't go outside. You're almost certainly deficient in it. So I really recommend a sublingual vitamin D3. These days I use the Dr. McCullough brand, personally. I can see it right in front of me now. Sunshine Mist, he calls it. This is like 1,000 IUs, so it's not a huge amount. And so this is where we probably, although, you know, you want to have, what does he say here, 6 sprays, something like that, 6,000 IU. Now, again, this is where it's better to test, because some people maybe even need 10 times as much as that. However, that kind of dosage is safe for pretty much anyone, unless you are already overdosed on it, which is very unlikely. Unless maybe you eat a lot of organ meats. That's probably the only chance that you'll have of being overdosed, other than supplementation. So yeah, I would go for like a sublingual D3 spray. I think the Deluxe brand I've also used before is also good. And the reason you want a sublingual is just because it's absorbed better. You know, I mean, generally I would always recommend going for a liquid sublingual over a capsule or tablet whenever you can.
So you've mentioned as well getting direct sunlight into your eyes. So would you suggest that people go out at how much of that direct sunlight would you need? And actually, would it make a difference if you have you know, glasses or contact lenses? Because a lot of contact lenses nowadays, they come with a UV filter in them. So that could be something that maybe is affecting people's levels.
Yeah, good question. So I kind of corrected myself there. We don't necessarily want direct, you know. Like, again, if we're out in the bright sun, we don't want to stare directly into the sun. That's not going to help us. And what I meant is unfiltered, as you said there, Helen. So, and yeah, not just like, as in, if you're sitting indoors, even if you're sitting in like a greenhouse and the sun is easily coming through the glass, that's still not giving you what you need. So you want to actually be out there and have it unfiltered. And yeah, absolutely, glasses definitely are a factor. As far as I understand, I mean, I don't know what the latest breakthroughs are in contact lens technology, but if they include filtering out UV, then most definitely that's something that's undesirable for what we're talking about here, unless they're specifically filtering out the UV that is detrimental and they are allowing to come in the UV that's not. I don't know if that's the case. I'm just saying, you know, if that were the case, that would be all right. But in general, yeah, if you're wearing glasses, if you're looking at your light through a glass, that's an issue. So actually, yeah, just going outside and being outside. And despite my comment about direct sunlight, it's true. Even if you're going out on a kind of miserable, grey, rainy kind of day, still just being outside for like an hour and looking at the world and not having it be, you know, come through glass, whether it's glasses or a window or whatever, that's still pretty good. I see some people are very sensitive to the lack of it. They probably want to look at other ways of stimulating serotonin. As I say, connection is a really big one, especially for women, but, you know, for people in general. So if you're feeling isolated and alone, that's something to really address. That's something to really look at. And, of course, there's a biochemical basis of it as well. So a lot of people, especially, again, people who are eating a diet which is low in poultry and a low in dairy food, which I certainly am. I eat zero amount of either. Oh, no, except for the odd bit of butter, but I don't have any dairy protein anyway. So tryptophan, which is the building block of serotonin, is quite high in those kind of foods. It's high in some other foods as well, like pumpkin seeds and stuff, but most people generally tend to be kind of don't get a lot of tryptophan, don't get enough tryptophan. So it's something that you could think about as well, supplementing a little bit of L-tryptophan. This is especially relevant if you have problems sleeping. That's when I generally recommend it to people, a little bit of L-tryptophan at night. But it's something to be careful with, especially don't have it if you're having any kind of medications. especially SSRIs, because they are kind of artificially blocking your reuptake of serotonin, so then you don't want to add more of a building block of serotonin because that can overload you in serotonin. And too much serotonin is as bad or worse as having too little. But yeah, so those are some of the kind of things to be aware of. So get as much direct, unfiltered light as you can. Look at your connection. Make sure that you have a supportive group of people around you who you can talk to, who you can connect with, especially nurturing, nourishing, including nurturing, nourishing yourself. They're all kind of serotonin stimulating activities. And then if those, like for instance, if you spend time with people and it just feels kind of empty and it just feels like it's just not doing it, maybe this can often happen if you've had a lot of drugs, especially ecstasy, speed, that kind of thing. They can really, hallucinogens as well, these can really deplete your serotonin. So then you might want to consider giving yourself a bit of the building block, either naturally through foods high in L-tryptophan, or by getting like a supplement that contains a precursor, which I don't have it anymore, but for a while I did after my kind of drug phase, which ended quite a few years ago. But that was really good for me to rebuild my stores of serotonin. But it is one to be careful with.
Yeah, L-tyrosine. It's an amino acid. Sorry, L-tryptophan. It's an amino acid. Yeah,
it's something that, as I said, found totally naturally in foods. It's naturally high in turkey, I think, and dairy especially, which is where the idea that having dairy before you go to bed, like a cup of warm milk, the tryptophan and as well as the calcium, both kind of tranquilizers. So yeah, it's good. It's something that's found totally naturally in food, but not in very large quantities. I think even in milk, it's only makes up 1% of the protein, which only makes up 4% of the milk. So you're talking about tiny quantities. So if you are very depleted, supplement can be good.
And to go and give and receive hugs as well, because I think skin to skin contact as well is very good for sort of serotonin production. And again, that's something that happens less in the winter.
That's more of an oxytocin thing.
Yes.
So yes, it is, but I don't think there's a lot of difference between hugging or just chatting with someone in terms of serotonin.
Okay.
Anything that makes you feel connected.
Well, that's good for people who don't like hugging. That's good news.
But oxytocin is important as well, just to clarify that. I haven't seen research that indicates it's particularly relevant for immunity, so that's why I haven't talked about it here. But it is relevant for health and happiness and well-being. So I'm not discounting hugs. I'm just being a bit pedantic. Yeah,
I mean, oxytocin, from what I know, is really good for bonding and helping you feel that connection. So again, I guess that might make you seek out people and then get that serotonin hit through the connection. So I guess it's like an orchestra, isn't it? It's all playing together.
There is a connection, actually, Helen. You're right. It's oxytocin, again, especially for women. There's much more true for women than men, this one. Oxytocin is a stress reducer. And so, as we said, stress is an important factor for immunity. So this is actually different for men and women. This is where the kind of favourite stereotype of, women want to cuddle and men don't kind of comes from. Because for men, having a lot of oxytocin that reduces their testosterone, which then actually increases their stress. But for women, having lots of oxytocin will reduce their stress. So that's kind of a different situation. And again, I'm not saying, these are not hard lines, I mean, I'm not saying that, all women like or should have hugging and all men don't like or shouldn't have. I'm just kind of pointing that that's why these kind of stereotypes are there, because our bodies are built differently, our hormones are different to some degree.
Yeah, that is so fascinating. So, so what about the tonic herbs, Elwin? Are they a good way of building your immunity? Because,
Definitely.
I mean, what you see, I just want to say, what you see when you go out into the shops is people sort of recommending things like echinacea as being the thing to take during the winter. But I think I didn't have great experiences with that, whereas the tonic herbs have been far more useful for me. Can you explain why that would be?
Yeah, absolutely. So, echinacea is a famous immune booster. That's what it claims to be, and that's what it is. Obviously, different products out there have different qualities. Some, many of them may actually be useless, but in theory, it should be good. But in the specific situation where your immune system needs boosting, which is not usually the case, and so earlier you said like the key was adaptation to the changing environment, Helen, and that was like that was a sentence soaked in wisdom, as far as I was concerned. That was exactly right.
Thank you.
And so this is the thing about the difference between the kind of standard Western and the kind of Eastern approach. So the Western approach is like, oh God, there's something wrong, we have to fix it, which actually is more of a masculine approach, whereas the Eastern approach, more of a feminine approach of let's like nurture ourselves long term so that we can adapt to anything that life throws at us, so we don't have to then boost our immune system, right? So let's be prepared, let's prevent, rather than reacting like to an emergency once it's already created. So herbs that help you to adapt. So there's kind of three categories of herbs, all of which are tonic herbs, all of which are really, really, really relevant. And so they all help you adapt in different ways. So there's the most obviously, I guess, is the qi herbs. And so the qi herbs are especially working on the spleen, stomach, digestive system kind of organ system, as well as working on the lungs. And so these are basically strengthening and educating and enhancing your immunity itself, right? So literally building more lymphocytes and T killer cells and all the rest of it. But then there's also the Jing building herbs. Oh, and so in the first category, I would really say, what we're talking about specifically here would be the herbs in the strength blend and also the herbs in the immune blend. So they both have a lot of those qi herbs. The immune blend is kind of a combination of all the ones I'm about to tell you. So bear with me. So then there's herbs which help to build up your Jing. So these are the things that help you to adapt and to build up your reserves of energy, all right? And so especially if you are kind of in survival mode, if you're in adrenal mode, if you're feeling kind of stressed or anxious or overwhelmed or burned out or fatigued, any of these kind of things, then rejuvenate has to be part of a immune system strategy, I would say. Because otherwise, you can take all the echinacea or immune boosting herbs in the world, but if you're running on empty, if your adrenals are overstrained and overtaxed, then you're going to get ill. Pretty much is guaranteed. So we have to address that. And then, so that's the rejuvenate is kind of refilling the drained reserves that we need in order to be able to adapt to the changes in our environment. But the serenity blends, that's the third blend related to Shen. So Shen herbs will help you to reduce that stress. Okay, so there's a difference between replenishing the reserves that get used up by the stress versus reducing that tendency to be stressed in the first place, right? And so that's where the serenity herbs are really good. That's where the Shen herbs are really good to actually just calm down the whole system, calm down the sympathetic nervous system, calm down this adrenal overstimulation. And so a combination of all three, and to some degree, the immune blend basically contains some herbs of all three. This is really what I wanted, like to give you all of those in one. So, if you wanted to be really thorough, you could have all three blends. You could have all three kind of herbs that target each of those areas. So to help to strengthen your actual immune system, and along with that, your digestive and respiratory system, and to rebuild your reserves, and to really calm the whole system. And if you have, let's say if you are maybe chronically stressed, you'd probably be really good to have some extra serenity and rejuvenate to really go the whole hog. But if you're generally good and you just want to kind of top yourself up and give yourself the best chance of staying as healthy as possible over the winter, then something like the immune blend is pretty much going to give you all of those in one simple to use thing.
So would you take that throughout the whole winter?
Yeah, great question. So the immune blend has got a couple of herbs in that aren't 100% tonic, most relevantly and specifically cat's claw. And so cat's claw is kind of a tonic, it's kind of not. It's kind of on the borderline between the two. So I would say I would have that if I would have the immune blend if I felt that there was any chance of feeling run down. So if I felt like I might possibly get ill, if I felt like I might be getting ill, certainly if I felt I actually was ill, like I mean, it hasn't happened for a long time now, but when has it last happened? I don't know, 3 years ago, something like that. Because I used to, be very weak in terms of my immunity, so I used to be ill a lot. And so I would just hammer the immune all day. I would have a cup of tea with several teaspoons and drink that, and then a few hours later I'd do the same again, and I'd do the same again. And my experience and the feedback that I've got from a lot of people is that really works, amazingly. It just, so, I mean, I'm not allowed to say that anything cures anything, so, it's not curing, but it is supporting your body and curing itself in a very efficient, effective way. So I can definitely, so it's good for that, and it's good for even recovery, after you're ill. And so that whole phase, however, having it for, 6 months, something like that, you could do. The other thing to do, though, if you're feeling really good and no, my immune system's fine, I'm not stressed, but I just want to have an insurance policy, in that case, I would go more for the longevity. And so longevity is basically a blend of 7 of the very best medicinal mushrooms in the world. They're called medicinal mushrooms, but they're all actually tonics. And so what these are doing is these are very powerful and very effective, both as adaptogens, so kind of gene building, and as Shen herbs and as immune herbs, so they kind of work on all 3 levels as well. But they're more kind of subtle, how would I put it? I would, if I were in a situation I had to choose between one or the other, and I actually felt like I could be coming down with something, I would prefer to have the immune on hand. But if I could only have one of the 2 for the next year, I would prefer to have the longevity, So it kind of depends on the situation. And of course, if you're a little bit confused by that, I'm not sure which of the 2 I fit into, you can definitely get both, and then let your intuition kind of guide you. Let your body tell you which of the 2 it wants, It's much better to give your body options for this. So, have a cup of one day maybe, have a cup of one another day, or just later in the day, and then just let your body tell you, and it will say, yeah, that's the one I want. Or it may say, I really need both of them. So yeah, those would be 2 good options.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. So also, I mean, we are looking at balancing our body, getting this orchestra of, so many things playing together, sort of a lack of stress, connection with the earth, nourishing our 3 energies. So what am I trying to say? Let's just take a moment. So if we manage to do that, everything is sort of interconnected. And it's really, one person's immune system can be very different from another person's. I think that's what I'm trying to say. So the fact that you're telling us to listen to our body and to take ourselves as our own reference is a really good idea. And when you look at the studies that are done by places like Harvard, they're looking into the connection between stress and our immunity, the connection between the health of our gut and our immunity. They're very difficult to sort of prove scientifically, because science is sort of self-policing and has very sort of it has rules that it has to follow, and they're not that adaptive, are they? This is one thing about science. And so actually running it through our own knowing is a really good place to come from.
I mean, this is the thing that I'm really diving into, and I have done for years, and I'm diving into more this year than ever before, is this whole issue of stress and how it's the root cause of all these issues. And it's a very deep subject that, probably we won't go into here as we're talking about immunity today, but it's something I'd like to address soon. Maybe we can do it in the next few weeks. Because it really is, it is the key thing. But the challenge is, I think pretty much everyone agrees on this now. It's one of the only things that the alternative health world, the Eastern health world, and the Western medical world, they all agree on. It's one of the only things that is important. What no one agrees on, or what almost no one seems to have any clarity on, and certainly when I first started this journey, I went to a medical doctor, and they said, well, there's nothing really wrong with you that our tests can tell, but you obviously look stressed, have a few weeks off work, I'll sign you off. And I said, well, what do I do about this stress? And he just looked at me like, I don't know. No idea. he was obviously a very stressed man himself now, thinking back, actually looking at him. Now I learned to kind of read bodies and read faces and stuff like that. And understandably as well, you know, being a doctor is a stressful job, as are many jobs. Anyway, point is, this is like a crucial key factor. Now, just on the subject of immunity again, Helen, I kind of went a little bit into serotonin, and I said that's especially important for women. I'd say just for the sake of balance, can I also mention that's something that's especially important for men and also for vegans in general?
Yeah, that seems great.
So that's zinc. Zinc. I was talking to a friend just a week ago who's in kind of similar space to me, kind of creating programs and trainings and stuff, and he's doing like a raw food starter guide, and he said, you know, I'm offering menu plans and stuff like that. What else would you suggest I put in there? And I said, well, you know, if you're offering a raw food starter thing, or, you know, it's a raw vegan rather, starter thing, I think you really need to, you know, tell everyone about these nutrients that they need. And he's like, oh, I never heard of that. So we went into that a little bit. The one that struck him the most that he, you know, never even considered, which made me realise there's something I need to say, because this is not something, I think I wrote an article about this years ago, and it's one of those complete, like, funny things, like in the world of people who do what I do, that you think, oh, I told the world that now, so that's it. But of course, even I need constant reminder of things, so of course so does everyone else. Even though this is my study and my life's work and all the rest of it. So, zinc. Generally, if you're not, like most zinc is concentrated in animal foods. So if you're not eating animal foods, then you are likely to have a deficiency of zinc. Now, I know it's going to be a statement that, oh, you know, really annoys a lot of people, especially in the vegan world. But it's true. This is something that can be scientifically, you know, easily validated. If you look at the nutritional requirements, especially for men, of zinc, and then you look at the the highest zinc-containing foods in the non-animal kingdom. You look at, say, like a pumpkin seed or an almond. I believe that those are the highest zinc-containing foods. They're about 6 or 7 milligrams per 100 grams, and the amount that a man needs is about 15 milligrams at least, and in many cases actually a lot more. So zinc is needed for testosterone production, which is one reason why men perhaps need more than women. Zinc is also lost with ejaculation, which is another reason why men maybe need more than women. But zinc is very important for all kinds of things. It's important for creating energy, and to tie it back to what we're talking about here, it's crucial for immunity. In fact, there seems to be a direct correlation, like zinc actually literally kills a lot of infectious agents on contact in the body. So zinc is like something that's really, really crucial, and something that, certainly if we're following a vegan diet, but quite possibly even if we're not, again, stress uses up zinc, right? And for men, like the testosterone uses up zinc as well. So it's something that most of us are kind of deficient in to one degree or another. And so I'd really recommend supplementing with zinc as well. I use a mineral-like zinc. Probably most of you listening to these interviews, you heard me talk about minerals before. You know that, you know, not all minerals are created equal, that most minerals that are sold out there in capsule or tablet form are really hard for your body to use and often create more problems than they resolve. The angstrom minerals, which are like the very, very broken down tiny pieces of minerals that are just as tiny as you would find in actual food, because a plant has processed them for you or an animal has processed them for you, is really what we want. So like a zinc liquid supplement, like you would get from Mineral Life, for instance, like really, really important, and especially if you're a man. And so I know that, you know, probably a majority of people listening to this are women. Your man probably needs it. Your man almost certainly needs it. You probably need at least some of it as well, especially if you're following a vegan diet. It is an almost tasteless liquid, so if you want, you can just add a little bit to you know, any men in your lives' food.
Elwin, that's right? Naughty.
I know it is. I know. But, you know, it's one of those things, like, you know, maybe someone would have an ethical issue with it if it's with an adult. But I know my friend Shazzy, for instance, she puts all these supplements and superfoods and stuff in her daughter's food.
Yeah.
And her daughter doesn't know it. And so I'm sure if she had a son, she would do the same thing, and she would include some zinc. And I think that's very wise. Like, she's very much into, like, letting her child be free and letting her choose what she wants to eat, which I respect. But along with that, she also cram in as much goodness as she possibly can as a child.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Which I also respect.
Is there significant amounts of zinc in seaweed? Or is that one of the...
Not significant. Not significant, no. And zinc is one of those things that's balanced with copper. Like if you have too much zinc, then you don't have enough copper and vice versa. Everyone's hair mineral analysis that I've ever seen, I've never seen a case of someone have too much zinc unless it's just that they've had loads of the supplement. But I've seen loads of cases of people who have got far too much copper and not nearly enough zinc. And it's one of the most common things that is recommended. Like, before, if I just wanted to put money on it, then before, like, someone even gets a hair mineral analysis back, I'd be like, well, I bet they say that you need zinc, you know, and magnesium. Those would be the two. And almost always that's right. Zinc relates to digestion as well. Where you don't have enough zinc, you don't have enough stomach acid. So this is like a big factor. And then you can't digest protein well, especially, and you can't digest minerals well either. So this leads to a whole load of other problems. So zinc is one of those key, like doing a small amount leads to a lot of benefit kind of steps that you can take. So I really highly recommend it. Obviously get a hair mineral analysis if you want to be sure that you actually need it. But like I say, usually I'd be happy to put money on the fact that it will come back saying you do need it, because it just does for most people. And it does especially for most people in my audience, and these people who, like me, have suffered or do suffer with stress, have suffered or do suffer with energy depletion, and have been in a situation or are in a situation of having a purely vegan diet.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're in the situation where you found that you're challenged, that your health in the winter is not what you would like it to be, and you find yourself coming down with bugs or not feeling as vibrant, is there anything that you can do to specifically go in there and help yourself in a situation of sort of where your body is under stress?
Do you mean like when you're actually ill, or do you mean like if you feel like you're about to get ill?
Yes, when you have an illness threatening, or yes, if you become ill.
Okay, yeah, great. So there's many different things. I mean, first of all, everything that we just talked about, right? I mean, it's better as a preventative, but it's still better to do it than not to do it in any situation, right? So if you're listening to this right now and you're feeling something may be coming on, it's not too late. I know probably a lot of you already have some of this stuff in the cupboards that you're not even using, right? So in that case, get it out and start using it pronto. And of course, if there's not a situation, if you just don't have it available to you, I would make it a priority to actually get some of this stuff, you know. We'll provide some links underneath for you to have a look. I think we've got like an immunity pack. I think that's out of stock at the moment, actually. So this is not a thing to try and push products by any means. I think we are actually out of some stuff. There's also a stress and adrenal pack. So have a look and, at least have a look at those, see if there's any, like, give you a reminder of the stuff we've talked about today. See if there's anything that really calls out to you that your body's like, yes, So maybe you felt that way when I talked about, the zinc, or when I talked about the D3 or something like that. You're like, okay, yeah, my body, or maybe the medicinal mushrooms. You're like, yeah, my body really needs that. Get yourself some of that, all right? So that's the first thing. Now, in terms of kind of emergency procedures, so the thing that we talked about, temperature, really important, right? So if you're like literally if you've got a cold and you're going around feeling cold, and especially if your feet are cold, your lower back is cold, that's really like not helping you, right? So there's two kind of ways to approach this. First of all, there's the kind of instant cure, instant quick fix. So this would be get thyself to a sauna or a steam room, right, or a hot bath, and warm yourself up, right? Especially if it's some kind of lung infection, or if it involves having, kind of dry or snotty sinuses or throat or whatever, then steam, whether it's a steam room or a bath, is probably, more relevant. Maybe get some eucalyptus in there. Definitely get some salt and some magnesium in there if you're having a bath to help to draw some toxins out, get some alkaline minerals in. And raise that core temperature, right? That's really important. And in general, do whatever it takes to keep yourself warm. And so if that means huddling over a heater, or a fireplace, do that. Helen always reminds me of the importance of keeping your kidneys warm, which is really good as well. I think my wife's got some special kind of top that like gives us like a, I don't quite know how to describe it, but it gives like an extra layer of padding around the kidney areas that she swears by to kind of keep them warm.
Yeah, there's tubes you can get. You can, like a sort of leg warmer for your stomach and kidney area, and you can put them under your tops. Yeah, you could make one as well. They're quite simple.
Is that, do you know, is there an official term for them that you know, Helen?
Oh, no, but there is. It's a Japanese name, and I cannot think what it is, but I can let you know, and you could post it under.
Yeah,
but they're really good.
Yeah. So, you know, that, like, I remember, you know, before when I was struggling more, like, sitting against the radiator, so my back was against the radiator. That's something. So, you know, keep yourself warm, basically. Don't just, whatever you're doing, don't just kind of suffer through the cold. That's not helping you. That's just keeping your immune system low, keep giving the infection a chance to thrive, right? So definitely get yourself warmed up. And ditto the feet, right? Kidneys are important. Feet, which relate to the kidneys, very important, right? Don't let your feet be cold. You know, definitely don't walk around in like wet socks or any of this kind of thing. If you just been outside, you know, get them off as soon as possible and replace them with some warm, dry ones. And you know, this may sound quite obvious to some of you, but I remember for years I would just completely ignore my feet, and you know, they would be like icicles almost, or it's something that I just thought I had to suffer with, right? And that's maybe how many of you feel. So no, do what it takes to get them warm. So that's the kind of warmth angle. And so that's the kind of external warmth angle. What about the internal warmth angle? So if you're really feeling quite, you know, like you're in the grip of something, this is what I do. This is my favourite drink, other than obviously tonic teas, which warms you up and gets the what do we say, pathogenic cold out as quickly as possible. So what I do is I get a pint of water. Probably don't want to have it freezing cold if you're already feeling cold, right? But don't want it warm either, because it kind of makes you feel a bit sick. So just kind of room temperature, something like 20 degrees, something like that. I put in about half a teaspoon of salt. Now that's quite a lot for some people. You may want to use a lot less than that. You might want to use only a quarter of a teaspoon or an eighth of a teaspoon. I use that much because I still have a tendency for my adrenal glands to be overactive. So the more that, so in other words, stress. So the more stressed you are, generally the more salt you want. The less stressed you are, maybe the less salt you want. Let your taste buds ultimately decide for you, though. So, like, if the amount of, like, if you try maybe quarter of a teaspoon and your body is like, that's nice, you know, maybe give yourself a bit more next time. If your body's like, oh, God, no, then give yourself less. But a bit, at least. And so salt is probably the most yang of all substances, the most warming. So this really counteracts the cold and the yin and dampness of the environment, of the weather, and of the illness. So some salt and some cayenne pepper powder. Now, I would use like a good teaspoon. But again, you've got to listen to your body with that. But if your body initially reacts like, ugh, like give it a chance. This is like a really powerful way of heating yourself up and dispersing that cold. Also some ginger. You can use fresh ginger. I guess in both cases you could use fresh chili or fresh ginger. Or you can use powdered ginger for ease. And with that, probably a little bit less, like quarter a teaspoon of the dry ginger, or maybe a very small chunk crushed up of the fresh ginger. Now, like, the most important one out of those two is cayenne. Ginger is like an extra, but the cayenne is like the really powerful one. So we've got salt, we've got cayenne, and then lastly, we've got lemon. Right, so you might want to go for some lemon. Even better, although perhaps a little bit more expensive, would be to get some vitamin C powder. So the type that I would use is probably like any of the types in the store, really. No, wait, not the lipospheric. So I would use like the truly natural vitamin C powder or the acerola C powder, something like that. And I would go for like half a teaspoon, maybe even a teaspoon of that. Stir that all together. And so you might notice, this sounds very similar, Elwin, to like the classic kind of cold remedy. The only difference is that I'm giving salt instead of like honey or some kind of sweetener, right? But that's a big and very important difference, because that means you're actually feeding your adrenal glands and you are restoring this kind of yang warmth to the body, rather than like sugar is just it might taste nicer, but it's just basically feeding the infection and not really helping so much. So having that in a pint of water, drinking that down, and what I have done is just have those all day, every day, and while I'm ill, and that's just amazingly powerful and effective. It's amazing how quick it will clear it and leave you basically feeling better again. Now, the effect that can create is it can create a bit of an intestinal discomfort, and it can create you having a bit of a explosive toilet session. However, this is not a bad thing because, like, one of the key factors that leads to illness in the first place, as any detox specialist will tell you, is having bunged up, blocked intestines, right? Being constipated, having like waste building up in your colon, and so clearing out the colon is like a really good way of like feeling better from a cold straight away as well. So that's like my favorite thing. So that I basically would drink that, and then tonic teas like immune tea, longevity. If you want like some of the individual mushrooms, maybe go for the reishi, maybe go for the chaga, maybe go for the cat's claw, this kind of thing, and you'll find that clears it really, really quickly.
So would you just down that pint in sort of quite quickly, or is it something you would sip throughout the day, Elwin?
I mean, I would, but I'm a downer. It's certainly not necessary. Just do whatever you want to do. Yeah, it's irrelevant, really. Just get it in you, whatever way works for you, I would say.
I mean, I tried it for the first time, your recipe, I think, a few weeks ago, and I had to sip it through the day because that cayenne packs a punch. But it's funny, the more you drink it, the nicer it becomes, and, you don't notice it so much, and you do start to crave it, or at least I did. But, yeah, I couldn't have downed that whole pint in one go. Wow.
I love that drink. I love it so much. I actually have that in the morning now, even though, I don't really need it just because I enjoy it so much. And, it's still good for you. So it is a thing that you can have all the time, for anyone wondering. But, yeah, it's something that I would have all day, every day, if I had anything like a cold, personally. Yeah,
I mean, I can tell you it's really effective. But my children found it really amusing watching my eyes bulge out when I had my first mouthful because I think I overdid the cayenne. So watch that. Okay, so I'm just thinking if there's anything else that we have to cover because this has been a long interview yet again.
Yeah, I think, we've given the basic building blocks for preventing and, what to do about it if you're ill and what to do about it also in terms of if you're feeling cold, right, and getting a cold. I think we've kind of covered.
Absolutely.
That's
fantastic. So, I guess we can bring the interview to a close now and just hope that you're all feeling empowered, that you can have the best sort of cold season and really sort of continue thriving and supporting yourself throughout the season. So, yes, if you have any questions or any comments, or anything that you use that you find supports you through the season that you'd like to share with us, then please leave a comment underneath and we'd be delighted to hear about it all.
Absolutely. I'll just mention as well that silver is something else that, I would use. We're just not sure what the situation is with it in the UK. We're still trying to get some clarity on that. But, if you're in a country where silver is free for you to get, then that can be a really powerful method as well if you actually have a cold. It's less of a preventative, it's more of a killing bad things thing, but that's something that you can consider as well. And the last thing I'll just pay mention to is the whole issue of gut health as like a crucial thing for immunity. So we've already covered that kind of several times over the last couple of months, so that's why we haven't gone into it again, but I would refer you to that. So if you have quite big digestive issues, quite bad issues with the health of your gut, then I would say that's one of the few times that everything I've just outlined to you may not be all you need, and you would also want to look into really getting your digestive system, especially your intestines, healthy as well as part of that immune system optimization process.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the Lionheart Herb blog, there's a couple of interviews about that, one about the microbiome and one about fermented food, and there's a wealth of information in there that you can use.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so thank you very much, Elwin. It was fascinating as usual, and thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.